Hey, and welcome to another episode of Broke But Not Out. I know I skipped a night, just due to the fact of having to get some stuff done and relaxing with my family. And I know I wanted to do this every night, so it does get a little more difficult, especially when you keep trying and trying and trying to remember new stuff to talk about and learning the fact that when you do it, it gets frustrating because the way you feel after you do these shows is it just absolutely drains you, and then trying to wait for the kids to go to sleep and the dogs to stop bugging you like they're doing right now. And it gets hard because right now I have three dogs driving me nuts right here and a cat. As you can see in the background behind me, the animals seem to think right now is playtime, which it is not. Bobo. Bobo, come on, get on. Bobo. Okay, sorry for that distraction. My dogs seem to think, stop. Pain in the butts. So my dogs seem to think that it's playtime, which it is not. Everybody has went to bed, hopefully. 10-year-old keeps coming down here, driving me nuts. The cat is right there. And the dogs are sitting there still trying to get my attention when I keep pushing them away. They are not helping with this podcast tonight at all, are they? There's Bobo. He's driving me nuts, trying to play with a cat. But anyways, I guess that kind of brings me to a sad point in my life. It was a great point in my life, too, at the same time. When I was growing up, I've had a few dogs myself. And uh, which I grew up with a lot of chow chows, mainly Bear. He was my first one. He kind of picked us because we first when we first ended up getting him, my stepdad's mom brought over three chow chow pups, and they said I could have one. Well, going through them, the other two were really kind of skittish, and there was one that just absolutely seemed like he picked me. So that's the one we took. He was actually at the time he was the runt. He was the littlest, and he was a black, looked like a black teddy bear. So we named him David's Little Black Teddy Bear. That was his registered AKC name. And then we had him for a while. He was a good boy. So we eventually wanted to start breeding him, having, puppies and that. And we went to a puppy mill and we were going to get a female pup for him. That way, at some point we could start breeding and stuff like that. Well, and mind you, he was about 2 years old at this point. When we went there, he ended up getting out of the car and ran to one of the female chows that was one that was just basically we felt sorry for the poor thing. She was just chained up in a mud pit and all she was good for was, you know, birthing puppies. So we asked how much she was. Well, we got her pretty cheap because damn cat. We got her pretty cheap because they said that she was pretty much getting to the point where she wasn't producing puppies. She was only producing like two or three, and they weren't surviving. So we got her a really cheap cost, brought her home, and we had decided not to do a litter of pups on our first try, but dogs had other plans apparently. And so they ended up having pups. Well, I don't know what the guy was saying because when we got her home, cleaned her up, and she went from being so sad and depressed to happy as can be, running around, playing, loved people, and they ended up doing what they do. She got pregnant, and she had, well, chows are supposed to have a litter of between like maybe five, six pups. She had nine, and we only lost one. And we tried everything to save it, but we just could not save it. They could get it to start breathing and everything again, and then it would just stop breathing, and she kept pushing it off to the side 'cause she knew something was wrong with it. But we ended up, we had the puppies, and where we were living at the time, it was a apartment building, but it was 2 stories. She decided to have the puppies right in the center landing. Like right when you walk into the apartment, you've got the downstairs where it had a living room and a kitchen, and then you had the upstairs where it had the 2 bedrooms and bathroom. So she had him right there, the landing, which sucked because it made it harder to get up and down the stairs. But our poor male dog, when she had the pups, he was trapped. He was trapped downstairs. So when he tried to get up the stairs, she would show every tooth in her head to him. It would not let him even come close to that point. So what we'd have to do is basically get her attention and kind of pull her off to one side so he could sneak upstairs, and that's what he'd do because he always slept in my room with me on my bed. So that made it difficult for him, even like to go to the bathroom. It was a fight to get him by there because she didn't want him coming anywhere near the pups, and he absolutely wanted to see his pups. He would never hurt his pups. But it was funny because we kind of, whenever she was outside and we had him in there by himself, we'd let him come up and he'd sniff and wag his tail, and he was a proud dad. And those little runts, and they were cute. They were fun to play with. They would sit there and just yip and yap and everything. And we ended up once they started moving around a lot, we got one of those old time playpens. I mean, back in the day, it wasn't old time. It was what we were raised with, where it had like I don't know, the one side where it would kind of fold down and you can crawl in and out of it. So that's what we had her and the puppies in, and she could get in and out of it, and the puppies couldn't get out of it. So we had her in those until those little guys tore holes all the way through the thing, ripped it up, wrecked it. But by that point in time, they were getting a lot more spunky and they were running around, and we ended up having to kind of hold them up into the kitchen because we didn't want them getting everywhere, getting into trouble or hurting themselves or anything like that. And they would just run around and they would nip. And you try to walk through that. It's like walking through a minefield with little animals with razor sharp teeth nipping at your heels, trying to play with you. But we ended up, raising them. We sold them. I know one pup we actually donated to a kid that had, I don't remember what, I think he had cerebral palsy or something like that. But in that dog, I know was best friends with that kid. All of our pups were really good. And then we decided about 2 years later to do it one more time. We had one more litter of pups. She had 7 of them. We managed to save all of them. And it was the same thing, walking around, little nipping things that tried to bite you like little gremlins or something. And it was fun. Now, after a while, we got rid of all the pups and stuff. We got them fixed. And what sucked was when my stepmom and dad, or my mom and my stepdad, sorry, got divorced, we ended up having to move. And where we had to move to was a little apartment that I know I brought up in the first episode, and we weren't allowed to have dogs there. So unfortunately, we had to find homes for Bear and Pandy. And the worst thing that I had, really, Scarlett, what really sucked was I had went to school one day and I knew that we were moving. I came home and my dogs were gone. My mom had found a home for them, and I never got to say goodbye to my dogs. That's weighed on me for years. And then now moving on, I mean, we've had a couple other dogs in the past, I know. We had a Chow Lab mix called Sadie, but where we moved to, we weren't allowed to have dogs. So that she ended up going to my ex's aunt's house, and she lived a long, full, happy life out there. And that was my kid's first dog because David really enjoyed her. He'd always use her as a pillow or anything like that, and she always stuck right by him. Been about one of the only dogs that I could let off a chain, and she would stay right next to me. I mean, she was smart as can be. But I mean, there was a couple other dogs in between, nothing that we really got overly attached to. And then we ended up, when my wife and I got married, we moved in with my mother, and she ended up picking out a dog for my oldest son, which was a pug beagle mix, which they named Copper. And then we ended up getting what we thought was a Shiba Inuit first, and I forget what exactly she actually is now, but Trixie. And that dog is so hyper and so outgoing. It's insane. But my wife and my mom knew that I really missed having my Chow Chows. So one day they showed up with a little pup, little female pup, and her name was Scarlet. And we still have Scarlet to this day. And we raised her. She's typical female Chow. She is kind of skittish. She really only bonded with a couple people. But then when we went to the pet store, I took my youngest son with us and we found a male Chow Chow. We ended up convincing my mom at the time because she had a credit through them if we could get him. She said yes, we brought him home, and that was Rhett. Rhett was a good boy. And I'll get to why I'm saying was because we had him for a while and we had puppies. They had six pups total. One didn't make it, but the first one came out fine. The next five, like the number two pup was the one that didn't make it. We think that it was in the birthing canal way too long. We tried everything to get her heart to come back and nothing. So we ended up not being able to save her. But then there was four boys that came out and we found homes for two of them right away, which my ex's aunt ended up taking, and she has two of them now. She has Sebastian and Zoe. And then one of them we ended up giving away to a family that their son has, oh man, what was it? I forget what her son has, but he's disabled. And that dog in it ended up learning sign language, has, is that kid's protector, always with that kid. But they live in a mobile home park, and every morning he seems to get out of his pen and go visit all the neighbors, and all the neighbors are always happy and they love seeing him. He gets treats all the time. And his name is Odin, or not Odin. Um, Crap. It'll come to me later on when I'm laying there in bed. Omen. That's it. His name is Omen because he actually turned out to be the biggest. And then we ended up getting stuck with Bo and Bear the second, which he is named after my dog I had when I was growing up. And the reason why is because Bear never seemed to attach to anybody, and he was super like attached to my oldest son and my wife. So we ended up keeping him for them as kind of an emotional support animal. And then Bo we couldn't get rid of because every time somebody new would come up, he would literally pee and poop himself and act like he was so beaten. But he is a sweetheart. He just doesn't trust other people. Now, what sucks is Rhett was beginning to turn more and more into my dog. He was getting more protective of me, but he had an issue with he was starting to get mean. And at night, you had to constantly say his name, or else he just sit there and growl and show every tooth in his head to you. And then it got to where he actually bit my youngest son in the face, which didn't cause, that much damage, but it left a couple marks. And then he ended up biting my wife in the face, which left a mark. And it was getting to the point where if I was in our bedroom and Rhett was in there with me, I was the only one that could seem to deal with him. Anybody try to come in that bedroom, he would show every tooth in his head and growl, and it just would not go good. Well, after he ended up biting my wife, we knew we had to take him in because it was on record at that point. So we took him up to the vet and unfortunately had to have him put down. That was one of the that was a very hard thing to do because it was hard because he was pretty much cuddling up with my wife and I. And when they gave him the shot to kind of start everything, I was the one holding him. And if it had been anybody else, he would have ended up biting them, but he didn't bite me. He trusted me. And so when he started to go to sleep, I held him and held him and held him. And then they ended up, putting him down, and they asked, since they didn't get too many chows in, if they could do an autopsy on him. We, of course, said yeah, because we want to know what was going on. We had found out that after they did the autopsy, he had a tumor right behind his right eye. He was losing his eyesight in his eye, and he had so much pressure in his head that it was basically he was always having a headache and in so much pain, and we didn't know it. But that was one of the hardest things I've had to do as far as being an adult was putting down an animal that I love. Needless to say, I'm not a big fan of putting animals down in general. I'm usually the type of person that'll try to more or less save an animal before I put it down. And don't get me wrong, I love a good steak. Ham is my favorite. I am not a vegetarian by any means. I don't believe in making my food suffer by eating up all the plants. Come here, bear. Bear, come here. Come here. And then, so to give you an idea, there's the Bobo, there's the Scarlet, and there's the bear. Bear, bear. My Bobo is. And Scarlet. So that's the dogs we have right now. And Bear is he hasn't bit anybody really, but he's starting to kind of maybe show the signs of what Bo did. And we're hoping that it's just, it's not what it was because he hasn't quite gotten that far. Jimbo, get back. Sorry about that. Bo. Trying to keep noise down, dude. So he hasn't gotten to the point of what Rhett was at, but we're just afraid that he's going to get there at some point. We're hoping that once we get them fixed, it straightens itself out. It could just be the hormones and all that fun stuff. But Scarlet, we're going to end up getting her fixed. She's only going to have one litter. And unfortunately, these boys will never know what it's like to be a dad, unfortunately. But it is what it is. And that little thing in the background, nope, is a complete pest. I prefer dogs over cats any day. It'd be nice if he could not do what he's doing, but all right, I suppose. I'll let everybody go for the night. I know it's not normally what I've been talking about. Normally, I've been talking about like the bad things that have happened in my life or what's going on. So it does kind of help that it's not going to be so much on my mind. after tonight's show because usually it takes me a while to kind of get back into a normal routine because they do mess up my head pretty good. So this one won't be so bad, but it is yesterday or well about a week ago was the anniversary of having to put Rhett down, and we did finally make his shadow box, which we have. So, but anyways, guys, please like and subscribe. I just want to see this grow, and I will catch you tomorrow.